Hey goalies, I'm Brian Daccord. Welcome to this month's Fuel podcast. I'm joined here with Steve Brown from Brown Performance Coaching. You're here because you understand that stopping pucks has more to do with, it's up in the noggin as opposed to your mechanics. And at the same time, we're here to make sure that you're in the right mindset to make the saves you need to make when you need to make them. Steve, we're going to talk about pressure today. All right, no pressure, but we're going to talk about pressure.
Sure.
So I'll lead this off. So I had the good fortune when I was with the Bruins, I worked on the staff of Robbie Ftorek, great coach. And we're having this discussion one day and someone's like, well, who's got the most pressure on the team? Yeah, so I'm obviously, it's the goalie. And Robbie looks at me and goes, why the goalie? I said, well, it's obvious, you're the last line of defense. If you don't play well, the team doesn't win, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no way. He goes, pressure's self-induced. So this third line left wing can put as much pressure on himself as your $7 million leading goal scorer as your goalie. It doesn't matter what position you play, it's how you perceive it. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I think in general, pressure or emotions themselves are constructed, right? So we construct them, so they are an individual piece, right? And so that third line winger can create pressure internally that would be akin to what a goalie faces, right? Now maybe on
same deal.
Yeah, so maybe on the average, if you were to average it out, maybe a goalie just as a position because of the responsibility, the single nature of it, that type of piece, maybe you do. But if we think about stress or anxiety or fear, all those things, it's really how you internalize and process, and then what you put out, what comes out of it for you as far as the emotion, right, and how you feel pressure.
So let's say like most of us, right, you feel pressure. I mean, it could be from your position, it could be school, it could be for an adult, it could be work, right? And when someone feels pressure, if we go with the self-induced, it's how you look at it in your mindset. So when you feel the pressure, what are the vehicles that we can use to kind of mitigate the impact that the pressure has on our performance?
Yeah, so there's really two things, right? So if we're thinking about pressure, there's really two tiers of pressure that you're looking at, right? So one is those skills that you're going to build up, something even mindfulness training, right? That's something that you're going to build up ahead of time. You're not going to use that acutely, right? So you're not going to go into, and what I mean by that is in the course of a game, you're not going to start to meditate, right, during the game. But we know that if you practice forms of meditation, right, over time, that can build up your resistance or resilience to stress, right? So then you have an internal kind of capacity to kind of lower to increase your stress response, right? So that you'll be able to handle it better. So that's a tier 2 option. We get in tier 1, and I think what most goalies are talking about is what do I do under pressure? What can I do in that moment when things are getting hot and there's a flurry in front of my net, now there's going to be a defensive zone face-off right in front of me. How do I get calm in those couple seconds, right? And so if we're looking at a tier 1 thing, one of the first things you can do is just kind of expand your vision, right? So if we think about stress, we tend to get tunnel vision, right? And tunnel vision forces us into this fight or flight response, right? It's a natural occurrence that happens with that. And so when we're in that state, that tunnel vision, we all those other symptoms that kind of creep up, right? All that other stuff, the increased heart rate, the increased breathing, all those things. And we kind of feel that. When we feel that, our body makes a prediction, I've been here before, this isn't good, right? And that's scary. When we can expand our vision, and the goalies have a nice chance to kind of see the whole ice, right? Especially that panoramic vision, kind of seeing off to your side. What you can do is take away that increased focus inside, that tunnel vision, and expand it, which kind of calms that nervous system down. And it can take a couple seconds. Another key thing to do is breathing, right? So if we talk about breathing, I think most people kind of think about, I got to match my breath, there's lots of different strategies to it. The most important thing you can do in the moment is a slow exhale, right? If you can slow your exhale, right, and that exhale can be longer than your inhale, well then in that case, then you're going to probably bring in more parasympathetic, recover a little bit, and be able to kind of be there a little bit more. So we're really looking at expanding the vision, right? And then you can come back in and focus, but doing it under your control, right? So I expand, I get out of it, now I know I have to get back focused. Then also kind of taking those slow breaths to kind of calm down that stress response. And then lastly, it's understanding, and this is something that you kind of work with overall, right? But it's something that if an athlete's been working on it for a while, they can easily kind of put in like that, is to just understand what is pressure, right? You're excited about it, right? And if you think about what happens when can you think about the last time you were excited?
The last time, so your heart rate gets going,
Yep.
that maybe you get a little clammy,
Yep.
right? Maybe a little your body temperature maybe heats up a little bit,
yeah.
right? You have that anxiety a little bit, right, of moving forward.
Yeah, so you think about that, all the same physiological symptoms that happen when you are stressed happens, or when you're experiencing anxiety or stress or pressure, happen when you're excited too, right? So we know that, most people have like butterflies in the stomach, or their mouth gets dry, they might have to use the bathroom, right? That's because your body's kind of turning into like a superhero, right? Those things happen.
Getting prepared.
Yeah, those things happen
primed,
because your body doesn't want to have to waste resources digesting food, right? Your body doesn't want to have to waste, your body your heart beats faster, your breathing becomes faster to get more oxygenated blood through your body, right? All those things are made for you to be quicker, respond faster. The little shaking that you described, or that jumping nervous energy when you get excited, is because your nervous system's firing so much faster, right? And that's going to allow you to be quicker, respond quicker, right? All those things. And so if you can tell yourself, right, if we construct emotion, we can either construct it in a way that's going to be, oh no, because basically your brain's a prediction machine, right? So it's predicting what's going to happen. It's not taking in this is happening and responding to it. It's actually making a prediction about what it thinks is going to happen. So if you're in there and you're like, oh no, this is bad, this isn't good, this is going to happen, right? In those moments, you kind of, the hormones you release, the protein, all that way that works, kind of sets you up for kind of a cascade downward. If on the other end of the spectrum, you kind of look, hey, I'm excited, and you start to really believe that, and you can understand that I'm getting excited, all this stuff's happening, then you can kind of use all that to your advantage.
So what you're saying is that the same physiological response to nerves is the exact same release of chemicals in your body as excitement.
Yeah.
So we've got to convince ourselves that they're the same, so that if we're nervous, you're excited. You're not nervous, you're excited.
Because that stuff only happens when stuff's important to you, right? You're not going to get nervous about something that's, usually something's at stake and something that you care about, right?
Okay.
So if you think about a scholar athlete, student athlete, you're thinking about school, probably important to you. Maybe asking somebody out on a date, maybe a difficult conversation.
Maybe difficult for you, but for most guys, not a problem. Okay.
Yeah, so you think about what these main things are, right? The things that are going to cause stress, and the difference is how you explain it to yourself, right? And if you can practice that, then it changes, right? And that cascade that it creates, that the emotions that you now structure change, and then that changes the way the physiology is.
So I've got like 18 questions off your first comments, but I'm going to go back. So I'm going to kind of go off of what you just said, a little bit of a different area. Would that be the tricking our brain? Would that be the same as forming a habit?
Yeah, right.
So when people say you got to have really good habits, is it fair enough to say that that's also a habit? Being able to look at those two feelings and associate themselves as one?
Yeah, so I would give pause to the idea that it's tricking, right?
Okay.
I think tricking is kind
so
of
that's a bad word,
I think
right?
tricking is kind of like a hack, right? Like, and I feel like those
Okay.
are, like, it's not you genuinely or purposely doing something, right? It's really about purpose, right? And so, last time we talked goals, right? Like, and we talk about trying to create habits. And if you just make, you put your sneakers out in front of the door because you want to run more, right? And you make that decision to put your sneakers there.
It's not a trick.
Right, it's not a trick.
Right.
But if you tell yourself, hey, I'm making a step in the right direction by doing this, and you reward yourself even consciously by doing that step, the odds of you like fulfilling your goal are much higher, right? And so the purposefulness, right, and being purposeful with the habit and the thought and the action, and this is something that you can take in almost every aspect of your life, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're out there doing drills, right? you start to get a little nervous, tell yourself you're excited. Practice it, understand it, right? And kind of get there, right? Looking back, you have athletes look back at times when they've been successful, right? Okay, were you a little bit anxious there? Were you a little bit nervous? Yeah, and you did well, right? And you kind of get them to understand and change the way they might experience it or how they describe that emotion, how it comes through.
Once again, like if you look at this, a great discussion on use of words, because you're changing that word, and that changes your whole outlook.
Absolutely.
Or your mindset on the activity. I'm going to back you up though, because I'm going to back you up to the beginning. So the soft focus. I'm a goalie, and I want to use your advice. And I'm getting a little, feeling the pressure. So I want to open up my lens. Can you tell me in all practicality, what does that mean? Do I start scanning the whole rink? Do I pick the far net and then work on my peripheral and open up? So in a practical manner, how do I use that first piece of advice?
Sure. So I think it's dependent, and a lot of these strategies are really dependent on the athlete, right? Like if you're an athlete, and we talk about pressure, sometimes pressure comes inside, sometimes it's internalized based off of what my coach is thinking, right, or what my parents are thinking. So in that case, stay away from the crowd, right? Stay away from your coach if that's going to cause you more stress, right? But I think in that regard, it's really about how much time you have, right? If depending on what level you're at, you might have more time just to kind of be there, right? If the puck goes down to the other end of the zone, then just take it in, right? And see if you can sit there for a few seconds, right? If it's going to be a face-off coming up and you have 3 to 4 seconds.
So moving the head or not moving the head?
No, I would keep the head still.
Keep the head still.
Keep the head still, and you're
Just
trying to just
open up your
see if you can
your
see the boards,
yeah.
right? If you can see the boards,
okay.
You know, and you can start at blue line and kind of work your way back, right?
Yeah.
And if you can kind of see that, and just kind of be there and take in the whole setting, kind of like a lifeguard at the beach, right? Like the more you can kind of see, expand your vision, the more kind of calm you're going to be and be able to.
So you just referenced. Every time you say something, I got another question.
All right.
You just referenced a coach or someone else putting pressure on you. So I remember, this is going back quite a ways. I played at Merrimack College, and we were playing RPI. It was one of the first games of the season. RPI had just won a national championship the year before. So we were playing the national champions. And I had a buddy, great guy. And like from the time we got back at school to the time we got to that game, he was like, "Hey, you guys are playing RPI. They're loaded. You guys are gonna get crushed." You know, like It was constant, right? It was just constant, and you didn't say it in a bad way, but it was like piling on, and it just, for me, it just built up the pressure. I didn't play as well as I should have.
Yep.
You know, we gave him a game, but I didn't play as well as I should have.
Sure.
And I always think back to, why did I let him get me to the point where I was thinking and just not feeling good about going into the game? So what advice would you have given me 35? It was a long time ago, guys. It's a long time ago. So what advice would you have given me as a player, as a goalie, at that time when someone from the outside was getting me worked up?
Sure. So you think about, like, you only have, if you're thinking about your thoughts, right, they're going to happen, right? Why would you give somebody else control of that part of you, right? If so much of being a goalie, so much of being a person is internal and what's going on in your head, why would you give somebody else power or rights to influence that space, right? You're actually allowing them to broadcast like their radio station inside your head. And that's not something that we'd want, right? We want to be able, we're always going back to what can you control, what can't you control? And you can control if you're going to accept that noise, right? If you're going to be able to take that in. And I think part of that is like, in the moment, there's thought stoppage, be aware of it, interrupt it, you know, and then all of a sudden replace that thought.
Okay, awesome. So, comment being made.
Yep.
That goes right through me.
Yep.
In a practical way, how do I stop that? Like, right? How do I the stoppage?
Yeah.
How do I stop that?
Sure. So if you're in that moment, right, and let's say you're like playing, you're in that, right, and all of a sudden the thought pops in your head, or you hear it, right, it comes in your head.
Right.
You become aware of the thought, right? Just self-awareness, right? If you're not aware that you're actually having the thought and it's just operating on the background, it's going to keep operating like a virus in a computer, right? So be aware of the thought. Then you interrupt it, right? And now with interrupting, sometimes it's a visual interruption, right? So some people think of a stop sign, some people think of a whistle. You could actually.
So you could have an actual visual cue.
Absolutely.
Like, I know this guy's coming. I know he's going to say something. I know it's going to get me wound up. So he says it. I throw up a stop. I look at a stop sign right in my head.
Yeah, and I mean, and then so you could do that. I mean, but it's also the same thing. Like if say a goalie gives a bad goal, right, and all of a sudden their thoughts are kind of cascading down the other way. Become aware. You interrupt it, and we always like to, as much as we can use a kinesthetic cue. I always tell them to try to do that, right? Because if we have like our stream of thought, we can interrupt it with something physical that we can do. So maybe just kind of hit your stick on the ice, right? And you just do something from a physical standpoint to kind of break the thought, and then you replace it with the thought that you want to have. So what's the cue? What's the be cue? What's the do cue? What are the cues that you want to have? What's your motto? What do you say to yourself? That are you ready? Like, what is it that you say to yourself? Replace it with that thought and be there, right? And maybe that gets connected to a breath. Maybe that gets connected to vision, grounding, something like that.
So it could be, okay, here's my breathing. Is there, maybe this is a silly question, are there a certain amount of breaths? So there's some guys performance. Okay, so before every face-off, take 2 deep breaths. All right. Then I saw a podcast the other day, and the guy said, take 6 deep breaths. Right? Does the amount of breaths matter? Like, does it have any relevance, or is it just for these people, this is what they think? Or is there anything scientific to the amount of deep breaths that we have to take to start calming down the brain?
Sure. So there's a lot of different thought to that, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with experience too. The more pressure situations you're in, the more you can get through it, the more like you can kind of shrink that breath down. You know, so if you're 25 years old playing NHL and you've been around a while, right, you might be able to take a couple breaths and be right back, right? If you're 35 and been there a lot longer, you might be able to take 1 or 2 and be right there, right? So it's really about like experience and matching the stress to that. When it comes to changing like physiology a lot, usually it's around like 12, 13 breaths that you start to see those changes. But you can elicit some response after just 1 or 2, right? So it's really what I always recommend with athletes is how much time do you have, and how do you put effort into that time to kind of carve out where you need to be, right? Because you're always kind of moving yourself a little bit closer. So if you only have 2 minutes, take two deliberate breaths as best you can, right? And then we can get into like technique and like what's the cadence, where does the air come, where does it go out?
Does the rhythm, the cadence, does that play into it? So if I was going to do 6 breaths, is it important that they're the same length? Should I try to change up the length, or am I trying to max out every breath?
So I think it comes down to like where do you need to be from an activation level standpoint, right? Because everybody's different. When I work with athletes, we'll have them like a 1 to 10. What do you like at a level 10, right? That's bouncing off the walls. You're not good, right? And 1 is like you're just too lazy. You're really calm, right? And we kind of identify where on that 1 to 10 scale are you, and then once we get where you are at 1 to 10, well, if you play best at a 6 to 8, and we know that, then we don't need to get you from a 10 down to a 4. We need you to be 10 into a 7, right?
So sit in that.
Yeah. So it's kind of understanding where your actual zone is as an individual and where you need to be. But ideally, like as far as like how do I bring you down? Because most people need to be brought down, right? We're not talking under pressure. They don't need to be brought up. They need to be brought down. And so if that's the case, usually like a 4 in, 4 out, right? Kind of just to get that baseline. But the more you can exaggerate the exhale, slow that down, the more parasympathetic part of your nervous system.
So maybe a 4-6.
Yeah, I mean, but under pressure, you might be breathing pretty hard, right? If there was like a lot of action in front of the net, you might be 1 in, 1 out just naturally, right? So then it becomes, can you just take your breath and just gradually get that exhale slower, right? So maybe it's 1 in, 1 out to 2 in, 2 out, 3 in, 3 out, and just gain some control of it.
Right.
Right.
I got a question for you. So, and you guys know who I'm talking about, I'm telling you right now, because these guys and girls are watching this podcast because they love being a goalie and they want so bad to be good.
Yep.
How do you balance that off as an athlete, as a goalie, where you've got this desire to be the best and you want to make it to the next level and you want to do so well, and you in essence put pressure on yourself because you want it that bad? But isn't there like a balance between putting pressure on yourself isn't a bad thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
isn't there a balance that you have to find as a goalie? And once again, like you think about the type of goalie that's watching this, the type of goalie that's going to, spend a half hour listening to us talk is someone that really wants it.
Absolutely.
So at the end of the day, like, what would you tell that person that wants it that bad, that puts so much pressure on themselves?
Sure. So there's a couple of things there, right? So the first is that not all pressure is bad, right? Pressure can be good, right? Pressure, if you stress is good, right? If you're in the gym and you don't put stress on the muscles, you're not going to grow them and you're not going to get bigger, you're not going to get stronger, right? So it's the appropriate dosage of stress, right? Pressure actually and stress actually promotes learning, right? So we need a little bit of that to get the BDNF in order to like learn, right? In order to get better at things. And so stress is good. When stress becomes bad is when it gets too far, right? When the body and the budget of the body can't handle it.
So it either slows down or stops.
Yeah, well,
Right?
basically you
Yeah.
see people crash, right? And they can crash like emotionally, they can crash physically by getting sick, right? You see those types of things happen, right? Burnt out, right? And I mean, that's a common thing where you see an athlete get burnt out all of a sudden, right? Like they've been grinding and grinding and grinding, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, what am I doing this for, right? And so it's really important to get balance. And when we think about balance, it's balance across wellness, right? It's really balance across so many domains, socially, balance around emotionally, physically.
Moderation.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so can you spread that out? You can attack and you can try to be your best in one area. You can try to be the best goalie you can be, but it has to be done with self-awareness, right? And so that's where we talked last time about like there's 3 ways to grow, right? And one of those ways to grow is through self-reflection. And so if you're not taking that appropriate time to self-reflect, right, to kind of think, it doesn't have to be journaling, but to kind of really going into, what drives me, what motivates me, who am I as a person, right, those things, and having those under control and really knowing what those are, right, then you leave yourself susceptible, if you don't have those, to those moments of kind of not being able to handle it, right? The more you investigate that, the more you kind of go in that direction, the more likely you are to kind of deal with stress a little bit better, the more likely you are to kind of have those relationships in place and the go-tos to be able to handle those things.
So, it's so funny you touched on it. We're talking about pressure and then finding out where you are and where you perform. And when you were talking about that, I was thinking about the different goalies and why you have to play so much, because you have to have enough time to start figuring out how you want to be to get in that zone.
Yeah.
So therefore, see, I work with some goalies that when they're relaxed and calm, lights out. I have some other goalies, when they play angry, they're lights out. Mm-hmm. And if they're not angry, they're not that good.
Yep.
But they play for some reason. Certain goalies play well when they're angry. Certain goalies are in the middle. Other goalies, when they're all serious and I'm focused and everything, like they don't play as well. Mm-hmm. But those guys chill out a little bit and they get the fun in their game, and then all of a sudden they're lights out. So it's not one size fits all.
Nope.
It's finding out, and you just talk about self-reflection. Finding out how you have to be and what your mindset has to be to know how you perform at your best.
Absolutely, and I can't tell you how many goalies that I'll be talking to, and I'll be like, what do you think a goalie should be like? And they should be like, oh, you should be calm, right? You should be poised, you should be calm. I'd be like, well, what do you play best at? And they're like, bouncy, right? And you're like, bouncy? I didn't even know that was a term, right? Like that you use, right? And so is really kind of tapping into that. Like when you play your best, what do you like? How do you bring your authentic best self out there, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're kind of, if you don't feel the way you want to, right? Then how can you access all that training, right? You kind of put a block on it. And so by kind of understanding like, okay, I need to feel bouncy out there, right? Or I need to feel aggressive, or I need to feel calm. Knowing that, you can kind of dictate kind of your energy level towards that and kind of open yourself up.
And you can, if you understand how you perform at your best, then you can tailor your pregame rituals.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're someone that needs to relax, right,
Yep.
then you've got to have a routine
Mm-hmm.
that is going to bring you down and get you in that relaxed state to go play.
Absolutely.
If you're a goalie that has success when they play angry,
Mm-hmm.
right, then they've got to get themselves in a zone. They got to get themselves in a mental mindset that they're ready to play angry.
Yep.
Bouncy.
Yep.
If you play well when you're bouncy and apt, then you've got to put your pregame ritual
Mm-hmm.
to put you in that state, that mindset, because it's not just the mind. The body actually responds to that, right?
Yeah.
Like physically, if you're bouncy, I need to have jump to play well, then you're physically gonna need to get to that point, right?
Yeah, because all you're doing is trying to set the. You can't ever guarantee a great performance, right? You can set the conditions for a performance, though,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so if our brain's a prediction machine, if your brain is getting feedback that, oh, I'm bouncy, when I've been bouncy before, I played well, then it's going to predict you're going to play well and you're going to feel good, right?
Right,
and
right.
so it's kind of like one of those things, right? So yeah, your pregame routine, you're funneling that to get to that experience, right? To kind of promote that experience so you can feel that way.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I think our time's up.
All right.
And fantastic. If you're looking to find us, we're at www.fuelathletictraining.com. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram. And we're really excited about, we have a formula here. The Fuel process is daily primers. It's weekly assignments.
Mm-hmm.
Steve gives out a weekly assignment every Sunday. You can see the Instagram post on that one. And we have our Fuel podcast that we just did. So thank you very much for joining us, and keep kicking.
Thank you.